Hey, what's up you guys, it's Connor, and it has been quite some time. Today we're going to be doing an individual book review for Heartsong by TJ Klune. If you guys don't know, this is the third book in the Green Creek series, which is an adult paranormal romance series. I read the first two books of this series last year, and then I just didn't read anything for a really long time. So before I ended up picking up this book, I reread the first two books and then jumped into this one. As for spoilers, there's not going to be any specific spoilers for this book, like what happens in this book, but there are going to be some mild spoilers for which characters have survived into this book, because it's impossible to talk about the book without talking about some of the characters, you know what I mean? Not every character in this series survives. If you don't want to be spoiled at all for anything like that, maybe give this one a pass. I will leave links to my reviews of the first and second book down below, as well as up in the card symbol if you want to check them out. Also for this one, I ended up actually listening to the audiobook of it instead of reading it physically. Some of you guys were telling me to check out TJ Klune's audiobooks because they're all narrated, well, not all of them, but a lot of them are narrated by Kurt Graves, and so I decided to give that a shot. Happy to say that Kurt Graves is amazing. I loved that he did different voices for all the characters, so you could tell who everyone was just based off of how he was speaking, so that was awesome. The last thing before we jump into the actual review is that each book in this series follows a different point of view. So the first book follows a character named Ox Matheson, and at the beginning of the book you find out that he is abandoned by his father when he's 12. He's told he's not going to ever amount to anything, and you follow his perspective as these new people move in next door, and he starts learning about them and becoming very close to these neighbors that he has. The second book follows a character named Gordo Livingston, who is Ox's like stand-in father. He owns the garage repair shop, and you follow him as it goes back in time and tells some of the history of this group of characters. In this book, we follow a character that's introduced in the first book named Robbie Fontaine, and we follow him at the beginning of the book. He is living in Maine, which is where the werewolf headquarters is. You learn about Robbie outside of when he gets introduced into the series. While living in Maine, he's living with Alpha Hughes's pack, and he's grown very close to this witch named Ezra, and you just learn about everything that's happening with that, his past, what happened with his father, what happened with his mother, etc., etc. And then you follow the story as it continues on when Robbie is a part of the pack and all of that stuff. I forgot to say that it's werewolves that is the paranormal aspect, but if you're still here, I'm assuming that you've at least read the first book. As usual with my book reviews, I'm going to go through my pros, go through my cons, give you my rating, and be done. My first pro for this book was following Robbie. He has such a different background than the main two characters that we've followed so far. In my review of Ravensong, I remember saying that Gordo and Ox have a very similar situation, and so the story almost recycles itself in the second book. There are some similarities between him and Gordo that I won't get into, but I do think that it was interesting that he is significantly different than Ox and Gordo. Robbie didn't start off in Green Creek, so he had all of these different experiences outside of the Bennett pack. The fact that a lot of his story takes place outside of Green Creek really opened up this world, really allowed us to explore different things than we've been able to explore in the past. We got to explore other wolf packs, how they're set up, how their social structure is. We got to learn more about some different witches. Like I mentioned, he's very close with a witch named Ezra at the beginning of the book, so I enjoyed seeing all of those different elements outside of the control of the Bennett pack. I also really liked the beginning of this book. It's so different than the books that we've had so far. I don't think this is a spoiler because you basically learn about it in the first book. You kind of learn about which people are going to be paired up with who in the first book, and then you just follow them as that happens. So Robbie's main love interest in this book is Kelly Bennett. Kelly is the middle son in between Carter and Joe. I thought it was really interesting because Kelly in my brain in the first two books was kind of like the other brother. He doesn't really have all that much going on besides being Joe and Carter's brother. So I thought it was really interesting to see Kelly through the eyes of Robbie in this book. You really get to learn about Kelly and how sweet he is and how just wonderful Kelly is. I liked learning about the relationship. Kelly is ace, so he doesn't have the same sexual, desires as a lot of the other characters in this book. So with that being said, there's not as much of that in this book, but I really enjoyed that Kelly was an ace character in this series. One other thing that I really enjoyed about Kelly and Robbie's relationship in here was that there wasn't like an abandonment situation. There was no you left me, which has happened in the first 2 books and was really like beat over the head. So I really appreciated that there was no you left me situation to explore in here, because getting that a 3rd time would have been kind of annoying. Outside of Kelly and Robbie, I really enjoyed learning about the other characters. I have become incredibly invested in all of these different characters of the Bennett pack, of Green Creek in general. I've become a lot more invested in a lot of the townies that are in Green Creek. Will is someone that I found kind of annoying in the first book, because he's just kind of loony and out there, but I really started to enjoy him in this one. In the previous books, we are really focused in on the pack, and I liked that in this book we get to focus more on the bigger picture. Like I said before, Robbie is not in Green Creek at the beginning of this book, so we get to explore outside of Green Creek, but we also get to explore outside of just the 2 houses at the end of the lane. We get to explore more of the town and more of the characters in Green Creek, and we get to see what the vibe of Green Creek is like. So that being said, I really enjoyed following all those characters. I really enjoyed keeping up with the rest of the Bennett pack, Mark, Gordo, Ox, Joe, Carter. And my favorite character in this series, I believe, is definitely Elizabeth. I said this in my Ravensong review because I touched on Love Song, which follows her, and I just really like her. I feel like she's like just the right amount of manipulative, but like in the best interest of the person that she's trying to get to do the things that she wants them to do. Did that even make sense? She knows exactly what she's doing. She knows what she needs to say to whom, when, to get the right result. And I just really love her. So it's safe to say that I was really enjoying the characters in this. As for the plot, I really enjoyed it in here as well. A lot of stuff happens in here, and I wasn't really expecting that. You really start to see how everything is starting to shift and how things are starting to change. Other packs are starting to come into the picture and starting to have an opinion on how the politics of the werewolves is going to go forward. Other witches are getting involved. Other people just have opinions on what is happening. So I just really enjoyed all of these things starting to shift and change. And I also like that a significant chunk of like the bad stuff that's happening in this series is wrapped up in this. There are still things to be done. Obviously there's a 4th book, but I really liked the catharsis that this book gave me when I finished it, because so much had been resolved. I will say with that, with how much stuff is done in here and how many dangerous situations occur, there aren't as many deaths as I was thinking that there should be. Not that I'm complaining, because I really like these characters, but I definitely think some of these characters should have died, basically. I expected there to be more casualties. Like, I feel like in the first book, there are some deaths that happened, and it's kind of tapered off since then, and I wished it kind of kept that same intensity the whole way. But with that said, this is a romance book, so it's not like a fantasy book first, it is a romance book first, so I don't know how I feel about that. As for the writing, it's very similar to TJ Klune's style that I've read over and over again in a lot of his books. I have a lot of them right here. His writing is incredibly easy to get into, incredibly easy to get through. I read his books so fast and enjoy them because of that, or, you know, at least in part because of that. I feel like he has a really good balance of heartfelt moments and sad moments and action scenes. I find myself laughing while reading, but also getting a little bit choked up while reading. So I just love how he's able to pack all of those things into one book. I forgot to mention this while I was talking about characters, but Rico was a standout character for me in this. I really enjoyed seeing Rico's journey in this book. He was like almost like a second main character. I really enjoyed seeing him progress during the course of this story and just everything to do with them. Rico's also one of my favorites. And the last pro that I'm going to talk about, which is not really a pro, was that I was so into this that while I was listening to it, I started building Gordo's Garage in The Sims 4, and I've since finished it and posted it to the gallery and everything like that. I was just like, I need to see this on my screen, so I went ahead and did that. So now I've built Gordo's Garage, and I also ended up building the house from The House in the Cerulean Sea, just because I was so into it. As for cons, I only had a few. My first one is that I am not really sure why Robbie is such a big deal. I like the character of Robbie. I find him interesting. I like him as a person, but I don't understand what makes him special to the point that he's like focused in on so much. I get why he would be important to the Bennett pack and especially to Kelly, but I don't get why he is focused on so much by other people. I just don't get it. Like, I don't think that there's anything like more desirable than any other person. He's not like Ox, where Ox has like this weird ability to become an alpha as a human. He's just Robbie Fontaine. So I don't know, I just was not understanding that. And so him being so important to whoever, I'm purposely being vague, I'm so confused on how he was able to remove himself from certain situations as easily as he was. Like, I feel like that wouldn't have happened. I just am confused by that whole thing. Another con that I have, which I don't think is a true con because I feel like it might happen in the next book, but I want to know how Livingstone is able to do the things that he is able to do. When we see any witch perform magic in this series, there's always limitations for what they're able to do. And yes, some witches are more powerful than others, but they're not all powerful. And so I'm a little confused on why Livingstone is to the power level that he is. Like, I get that it's dark magic or whatever, but there should be like some type of limitation on, I don't know, what they can do, because all the other witches are limited on what they can do. So that was one thing that gave me pause. And my last con is that I thought that we would get away from Ox's quote, basically, that happens nonstop throughout this series. That quote is him telling anyone and everyone that will listen that his daddy told him he was gonna get shit all his life. That is repeated so many times. And I thought that we would get away from it because we're following Robbie, but we didn't. So I think that's here to stay, but it's like one of those things that it's repeated so much that it's starting to pop out at me every single time it shows up. So overall, I had a lot of pros. I really enjoyed following Robbie and seeing his experience and how it was so different than some of the characters that we've followed in the past. I really liked the scope of this book and how it was much bigger than the previous two books. I liked all the goings on that happened. I enjoyed the writing. I enjoyed the plot. I enjoyed the pacing. I enjoyed the romance. The only things that I had were a couple of small things here and there. So I ended up giving this book 4 stars. Sorry if my eyes are glossy. I keep coughing because this is the most I've talked in months. I did really enjoy this, just not as much as the previous 2 books. That's why I ended up giving it 4 stars. Still am having a freaking blast following the gayest wolf pack of all time. So that's my review on Heartsong by TJ Klune. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up and comment down below if you've read this book, what your thoughts on it were. I'm actually picking up the audiobook for Brother Song, the final book in the series, so my review for that one should be coming up here in a bit. Anything else you want me to know, leave it down below, and I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.